I believe you can see my screen now.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So just like that of demand, we only limit this to only 3 types. That of demand, we have 4. Joint or complementary supply. We have that those goods that are to be produced or supplied together. Now, for composite, it simply means a particular product that can serve several purposes. You know, once you supply it, it can be used for anything. It can serve several purposes. So the supplier of the supply of the same commodity for other purposes. So for the competitive supply may be defined as when many commodities are supplied for the satisfaction of a particular one. It is the supply of 2 or more commodities that can serve as substitute to one another. So when you look at the explanation under that of demand with that of supply simply means when you have all these types, you will know what they are actually supplied for. Composite, competitive. Now I have a question here. What is composite supply? And another way of saying this is what differentiates between composite supply and composite demand. If you are noting down the questions, you can quickly just chip it down. Differentiate between
Wagwan, guys.
On the left don't happen again. No. You guys are just too much. What the fuck?
Has logged out again.
Not too much now. Listen,
From our side. The problem now from our side.
not from our side, Joe.
And
Now
network.
from my side, no be about our location. I'm just back.
All right, can you see my screen now?
No, not
Yes.
yet.
Sorry, the network
No, ma,
is
no,
from
ma.
here.
No, ma, we can
Yes,
see
ma'am.
the hand now.
You can see it now, man.
Yes,
We
ma.
can see it.
Yes, ma'am.
So have you noted the question? Differentiate between composite demand and composite supply.
Yes,
Did you
ma.
get the question? Now,
No, ma'am.
what is the difference between composite supply and competitive supply? The difference between composite supply and competitive supply. Those on YouTube, I believe you can still see my screen.
Ma'am, please come again with the question.
I said the first question, differentiate between composite demand and composite supply. Then the second one, differentiate between composite supply and competitive supply.
Ma, is it composite
get the
supply
questions?
or competitive supply?
Composite supply and competitive supply.
Okay, ma.
That's the second question. Why I ask you to know this question is for us to get the differences clearly. Sorry, those that are raising up their hands. Is it the question or you want to? Please speak up. Oh, I've not muted you.
It's not.
Are they asking question? Favor.
Yes, I want to answer the question.
Okay, you want to answer the question?
Yes, ma'am.
No, please, let's move on because of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Note the question down yourself, answer it, and then I just want you to at least be able to know the difference. So if
okay,
anybody is not able to answer those questions, you try to see how you can answer it, like Favor
okay.
wanted to. Emmanuel, Olani,
Ma, I have a
our
que-
time is, what are you saying?
Ma, can you shift your
Yeah. Can we?
Ma, can you shift your slide back to the joint or complementary supply? Let me just screenshot
So,
it,
okay, you want
please,
to
ma.
go back? Okay. All right. Have you seen it now?
Yes, ma.
All right.
Yes, ma. Thank you, ma.
So let's quickly go to, I will want to take that of demand first. So if you have any question on those types of demand and types of supply, I will want you to note it down so that when we are rounding up the class, we'll just quickly go back to those questions. But let's see change in demand and change in quantity demanded. I will want us to have it at the back of our mind that anytime there is a question on differentiate between when we say change in demand and when we say change in quantity demanded. Bello, can you quickly ask a question before I move on?
No, ma, I don't have a question. I just wanted to ask that the material you're using, is there how we can get it, ma?
I'm not giving you the material. That's why I'm explaining it on the slide. And once you have the recording, it should do. Okay?
Okay, ma.
Favor, you are drawing us back. Oh, let's continue. What is Favor saying again? Oh? All right, okay, let's continue. Now, when we say change in demand, the typical way of looking at it is what are those factors that influence demand? What are those factors that influence quantity demanded? Now, for the quantity demanded, we know that when you list out those factors, you say price, once price change, it affects demand. Once price change, it affects quantity demanded and all that. So differentiating between these two concepts, change in demand and change in quantity demanded. A change in demand always come about when there is a change in other factors that influence demand, apart from price. So let me come again. When you look at this, price remains the same. So that is why we say all other factors that influence demand, apart from price. So what brings about a change in demand is price does not change. You have been buying gala for 100 naira. The price of gala remains 100 naira. But you decide not to go for gala again, despite the fact that the price did not change. So a change in demand can be caused by any other factor apart from price. So that is why in this graph here, price remains the same, but this demand shifts forward, or we can take this as the initial demand. It's changed from this to this to this. So change in demand is a bodily shift in the demand curve. It's a bodily shift in the demand curve. So if you are asked what is the other name for a change in demand, is either you call it bodily shift in demand curve or you call it change in demand itself. Now, these factors can be change in taste, change in prices of related goods, change in income, change in the size of the population. You know all those factors that influence demand. Apart from price itself, you know those factors we listed in the demand function. Once there is a change in any of those factors, like that of related goods, if it is a supplement, you know how it will affect. If it is a substitute, you know how it affects. So any of these other factors that change, your taste can change in favor of a particular good. Your preference can change against a particular good. So what we are saying in essence is that any other factors that make that make demand that make demand to change. Those are the factors. Those are the things that will cause a change in demand. So this is an example of the graph how a change in demand. Price remains the same, but the demand for this change from here to here to here, you can see that it's different. So that is why we call it change in demand. The other one, change in quantity demanded. Let me shift this graph because it has broken. So the graph is together now. Okay, scattered. So, for instance, let me just use another graph. I think I have another one somewhere that we can use to explain. Okay, let me go to only one. So let me just use this particular graph. It is not a bodily shift. It can be a movement along the same demand curve. So you have only one demand curve. Now for this demand curve, you can have price at the highest, you can have price at the lowest. Whatever is happening to the price will affect what is happening to quantity demanded. So for a change in quantity demanded, it is also referred to as movement along the same demand curve. When price increase, what will happen to demand? It goes down. When price decrease, what will happen to demand? It goes up. Now, whatever happens, if there is a high price, you associate the highest high price here, you associate with low quantity. And once the price is going down, you associate it with what? Higher quantity. So this is the highest quantity associated with the lowest price. Highest price associated with the lowest quantity. So movements along the same demand curve simply means that whatever happens to the price is only the price change that can cause a change in quantity demanded. So a typical law of demand, that first law that we are familiar with, explains this one more. It explains the change in quantity demanded more than any other. So let's quickly see the other one for the supply. When we say supply, you know, it slopes upward. It slopes upward.
You lag Wi-Fi no good though.
I don't know. See, person no go talk. That one a lie. I don't know.
Who be all this one like this? So now just the shout. Small,
You said
small
that
now.
You talk
what
say
is
person they shout.
this
Now you don't go dey shout. Bro.
business
Una
admin guy.
group member,
Just dey
una
talk
group
too much.
Alpha,
member.
Mona the calm now. Small, small. Mona the calm. Small, small.
Yeah, I mean,
You
una
guys
group
in business
member.
admin, you guys talk too much, Joe.
The
Who be
woman
that?
just leave. Nah. All of una
Who
don't
be
they
that? Who they
shout
talk?
like
Okay.
this thing.
Why you can't join them now? be this one? She na clothes they say on top zone.
No, na the camp, Jare.
Mula, I be like say you don't cash out, abi.
You go still copy clothes for future though. If you say
No man, no man.
You don't cash
More
out,
na no for.
Abadua.
I
you
be
make
press
some
like
people,
2K for now, no for.
you make some people come out,
Press
maybe
money
man
for
back.
make
After I
press
will
money
start
for next
business,
time.
I go copy my
Me,
thing.
all of una, more na paste your answer for comment section.
You take
Why I
am.
want do you data money or your pay stars are sharp?
Face your answer. Who be mumu for here? Who go pay Zaza?
Paste answer, and let me see what I can do.
Face Zaza.
You go use your answer.
Una no trust me, abi. Una no
Face your
trust
answer.
me.
I'm ready to give. Face Zaza.
Go
First
trust
Azar,
you.
first two people to
Let's continue. So for the change in supply, we see that it is a bodily shift in the supply curve. But unlike that of demand, what you should take note of is the fact that for supply, we have a curve that slopes upward. So if I put it, let me put it beside each other now. If I place it beside each other, what you should take note of is for the supply curve, it slopes upward from left to the right. And the change in supply is the bodily shift in the supply curve. But for the demand curve, we have let me put it beside each other. So I just want us to note the difference. That's why I want to place it beside each other. Now for the demand curve, we have it sloping downward. So they are beside each other now. Bodily shift in supply curve is slopes upward from the left to the right, But bodily shift in the demand curve is slopes downward from the left to the right, downward. This is upward, this is downward. So that's just what I want us to take note of. Now, for the change in quantity supply, we have an upward sloping supply curve, but the price is the one that is changing. Once the price is low, quantity supplied is low. And once the price is increasing from P0 to P1, we have supply quantity supply also increasing. So when you look at this upward sloping supply curve, it explains that as price changes, quantity supply also change. So the difference between whether you call it change in supply and change in quantity supply, you have to note it through the factors that influence them. For change in supply, price remains the same, but there are some other things that could make that supply to change. But change in quantity supply is the price that is changing that leads to this change in quantity supply. So for this also, another way of explaining this is when we call it bodily movement along the same supply curve, like that of demand. Movement along the same supply curve. So price is here, quantity supply is here, price move upward to P1, quantity supply also move upward. So it can continue in that form, showing the law of supply that support the fact that higher the price, the higher the quantity supply. The lower the price, the lower the quantity supply. That makes it an upward sloping supply curve. But so far, let me see if we, before we move to quickly see, ask questions so that we will know at least what we have been able to cover so far. Do we have any question? All right, Kehinde, you can ask your question. Have I muted here? Kehinde, you can.
the graph of the change in quantity demand demand.
Yeah, it's broken.
Okay.
It's broken. Yeah, I cannot quickly arrange it now. I think it is not grouped. So any movement shifting it downward, that's what. So I will still see whether I can still do that.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. But in case I'm not able to do that, let me see as I shift it, because it is not grouped anyway. So let me shift it to the next page. It's not grouped. So the arrangement will take time. But whatever I'm doing to it, I will need to start grouping it separately and all that. So it will take time. So the graph is not grouped and I cannot start drawing it now. So that I will do that and maybe send it to you. Is any other person asking question before we move on? All right, so let's quickly look at elasticity. Abidemi, you are still raising up your hand. You can ask. You can ask your question, Abidemi. So is that person just raising up hand for nothing? All right, so is Michael still raising up his hand? Now let's see elasticity. And I will round up with this. If we can still take equilibrium, let's see. Elasticity of the concept of elasticity itself simply refers to the extent or the tendency for demand to respond or to react to anything that happens to the factors that influence it. So in essence, what we are trying to say is anytime we say elasticity, from the word elasticity, it simply means it can respond And the response can be either more or less, depending on the rate or the extent to which it can respond. So the concept of elasticity itself, it's just the tendency for something to respond. But when we now say elasticity of demand, it's now pointing to how demand responds to the factors that influence it. Now, those factors that influence demand can be price, the prices of related goods, some other things. How demand responds to any of these factors. We name the type of elasticity in line with those that influence it. For instance, when demand is responding to change in price, then we say price elasticity. When it is reacting to change in income, we say income elasticity. And when it is reacting to change in any price of the related goods, then we say cross elasticity of demand, or what we say cross price elasticity of demand. So let me chip that in here. It is cross price because it is responding to change in price of any related good. And whenever we are talking about elasticity, we have measures of elasticity. So for these measures, let's see if we for these measures, the measures of price elasticity is change. We will have percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. That is when demand is responding to change in price. So whichever one it is responding to, it has to be the denominator. So from the screen now, you see the price elasticity of demand is measured as percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Now, I have some examples indicated here, but let's quickly see that of income. That of income, the measure. When we say the income elasticity of demand is measured as percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in income. So it is whatever it is that it is responding to that will be the denominator. Quantity demanded will be at the numerator. It will be at the top. Then the ones that it is responding to will be the one down. Now, for the price elasticity of demand, we have different types. We have types. So it depends on the measure. The measure or the coefficient will determine what type of elasticity we are referring to. If you are saying it is elastic, the measure, you will have a specific figure for the coefficient. Now the coefficient can be 0, it can be 1, it can be greater than 1, it can be equal to infinity, depending on the extent of the response. So there are different ways of showing it, but in this now, let's see it. When we say unitary, it means the coefficient is simply 1. So the coefficient of price elasticity here is simply 1. And the graph to show it is when you look at price change, the rate of price change is this measure, is just this. Price could change from, let's say at this point it is P1, at this point is P0. The price change from P1 to P0, that is a decrease in price. What is the response of this quantity to that change in price? So if you look at the vertical distance of the price change here, is exactly equal to the horizontal distance of the quantity change. And when you have the same vertical distance with the same horizontal distance, then you have the graph of unitary elastic demand. So the right word is unitary elastic demand. So you will draw the graph in such a way that if you are to make this a perfect square, you have a line that will divide a perfect square into like two equal triangles. So this line should be drawn in a way that if this is to be a perfect square, assuming we have a line here and here, we draw an horizontal line up, a vertical line down to make it a perfect square. This graph, this line, this diagonal line will be in such a way that would almost divide that graph, that square into two equal triangles. So far, when you are asked, how do you explain the types of elasticity? For this price elasticity, we have unitary that is explained with this graph. And for unitary, you have it drawn in this way. For elastic demand, we will still go back to the measure in mathematical way, apart from showing it in the graph. So whatever you calculate and you arrive at, if it is a figure that is greater than 1, if you have a coefficient that you calculate and is greater than 1, once the coefficient is greater than 1, it simply means that it is elastic. For one that is greater than 1, it could be maybe 5. Once you calculate the coefficient, it could be 5, it could be 2. But once it is greater than 1, it simply means we have elastic demand. And any coefficient that is greater than 1, if you want to show it on a graph, for this type of graph, this time around, for demand, for a typical elastic demand curve, you have a flatter demand curve. If you look at this diagonal line is flat, is flatter. And for a flatter one, if you look at the vertical distance in the price change, you will see that the vertical distance in the price change is not as much as the horizontal distance in the quantity change. So it simply means price change by certain percent, but the response of quantity to that change is more than the price change. So example that I usually give is price change by 2%. Mind you, that change could be an increase or decrease, it depends. So price change by 2%, but the response of quantity to that price change is more than 2%. So once you have this, a flatter graph will show you that obviously the vertical change in the price is lower than that of quantity change. Quantity respond more than the price change. That is when we have elastic. And for the coefficient, once you calculate it, definitely, or obviously, you will see a figure that is higher than 1. So let me move now to the third one, inelastic. Inelastic. If you look at this now, we have the coefficient lesser than 1. What this simply means is that whatever figure you arrive at, it will be lesser than 1. And you know, any number that is lesser than 1, obviously it will be 0 point something, maybe 0 0.9, 0 0.99, once it is lesser than 1. And once you have the coefficient that is lesser than 1, it obviously tells you that once price change, the response of quantity is not as much as that price change. The change in price is more than that change in quantity. So if you look at the graph here, we have a steeper demand curve. And by steeper demand curve, it simply means, sorry, let me confirm something. All right, let's continue. A steeper All right, I just noticed that it wasn't recording. Maybe because of that network. So a steeper demand curve will tell you that if you have it coming down, then definitely you see the vertical distance in the price change is more than the horizontal distance in the quantity change. Now, the difference among these three, you have to, when you are to show it through a graph, or if your questions try to want you to identify which one is elastic, which one is inelastic, you have to look at the behavior. Elastic has flatter, inelastic has steeper curve. Now we have two extreme cases where we have perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic. For perfectly elastic, it simply means no matter what is happening, the price could be changing indefinitely. The price could be changing, but what is happening to quantity? Quantity response is also responding in a far, the way at which, the manner at which quantity is responding to price change is even far wider than one can imagine. So for a perfectly elastic where the coefficient is equal to infinity, if you look at this symbol here means infinity. It simply means for a particular price, you are so used to buying at a particular price, but once there is a little or marginal change in price, quantity demanded will react indefinitely. So by this perfectly elastic or this horizontal line, it simply shows clearly that quantity can be here, it can be here, it can be at any point. You see situation where quantity demanded can be anything. The response is far wider than the price change, which is why on a good day we say the coefficient is equal to infinity. Now, if you are noting, I will want us to take note of two things here. When we say coefficient is greater than 1, you know, any number that is greater than 1 can be 10, can be 5, can be 2. It can even be 1,000 or any number. But where do we draw the line between elastic demand and perfectly elastic demand? These two things that we want us to take note of. If we say perfectly elastic demand, is there any particular figure we should arrive at that will tell us that it is perfectly elastic or just elastic demand? Is there any figure we will arrive at? What I will want us to bear in mind is the fact that for perfectly elastic, it simply means just a marginal change in price. You see situation where demand responds in a very wide or unimaginable way. So, you know, sorry, Hassan, I'm coming, I will respond to your hand raise. Let me just quickly go to the measure that I give example here. When you look at this measure, anytime you are to calculate and you are to arrive at a definite coefficient, if you look at percentage change in quantity demanded, you will see a situation where just a small change in price, maybe it is just from price change from maybe 3 naira to 2 naira. And if you calculate the percentage change in price, it's something negligible. Now you have a situation where the percentage change in quantity demanded, which happens to be the numerator, you will have a very high change. So once you have such, definitely whatever you are going to calculate will give you a very large number. So which is why we say for a perfectly elastic demand, we have coefficient that is high. So let's look at this example. When we calculated it, if you see this calculation gave us coefficient that is just 0.5. And why do we now explain it as less than 1? because anything less than 1 we give you 0.5, 0 point whatever. Like I said, 0.9, 0.99. So if you look at this coefficient that gave us is 0.5, because it is lesser than 1, we interpret it as it is inelastic. Now, for the one that I just explained now, let me just go back to that diagram. For perfectly elastic demand, any coefficient that is not only greater than 1, but is far higher that one can ever think of, then we will say it is perfectly elastic. And for such, we have this. Somebody raised up his hand before you. Hassan, you can speak now. Is Hassan still raising up his hand? Hassan? Okay, Oyetoro Samson, you can ask. You can talk now.
Good morning, good afternoon, ma.
Yeah.
If you have a figure as 0.999, can we approximate it to 1? Or we'll just leave it
You
as
can,
inelastic demand?
for interpretation's sake, you can approximate to 1, but that definitely, because it is so close to 1, your interpretation is going to be shifting to unitary. But if you leave it as 0.99, you know it's less than 1, then your interpretation can be inelastic, because it is less than 1. You understand? So if you approximate, it can change your interpretation or change the type of demand, elasticity you are trying to identify. So it depends. So when you are calculating and you are using coefficient, oftentimes you should be mindful of approximation so that it will not give you the wrong interpretation. So Hassan is not saying anything again. All right, so let's look at the last type, perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic. This perfectly inelastic simply means whatever happened to the price could rise indefinitely, the price could fall indefinitely, quantity demanded remains the same. So it doesn't matter what is happening to the price, quantity demanded does not even respond to price change at all. Unlike that of perfectly elastic, where just a little or marginal change in price, quantity demanded reacts in a very wide way. But for the inelastic, so now I want us to quickly read what I have here for us to. That's gone again. The network has disappeared again. Hello, can you still hear me?